Well, hello, hello, hello. And I want to welcome you to another episode of the Strong Moms Fitness Podcast. If you're a regular listener of the show, you've probably noticed that I haven't done many interviews lately. I probably have done almost 70 episodes at this point, and at least 50 of them have had interviews. I stopped doing the interviews and guestings because I was hoping that I could share more of myself with you guys. And so that's what I've been focused on since January, answering your questions from my perspective and show you the things that I've learned and the wisdom I've gained through all my training and working with individuals. So I've cut down on the interview aspect. However, one afternoon, I'm going through my Instagram and I get this amazing DM from Jessica Lorion. She's just such a bright and vibrant woman. And I really could feel her energy coming through her video. She sent me a video DM. She's pretty badass. I was like, I have this gal on the show. So today I will be interviewing Jessica. Jessica has spent the past 12 years as a professional actor, voiceover artist in New York City. And now she is the host and producer of her own podcast called Mamas in Training Podcast. She supports pregnant women and aspiring moms on their journey into motherhood. And what makes her show so different from other pregnancy and motherhood podcasts is that she herself is not yet a mom. She has a very interesting story that she's going to share with us about an autoimmune disease that has delayed her journey into motherhood. And like me, she has decided that she wants to learn all this stuff ahead of time so that she can be prepared and handle anything that life throws at her. And that is certainly what she has done. She is this amazing liaison in the pregnancy, postpartum, and fertility communities. I'm really excited to welcome her on the show today. Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for joining me today on the Strong Moms Fitness Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure.
you're so welcome. I really want to just kind of hear in your own words, what's your story?
What makes me maybe a little bit different than a lot of the guests that you might have on the show is ironically, I'm actually not yet a mom, but there's a reasoning behind that. And I'm so impassioned to speak to moms and with moms and support moms along their journey, as I definitely desire to be a mom one day. Um, so basically, sort of long story short, is I'm actually originally an actor. I am from Massachusetts, but I live in New York City here and moved here pretty much right after school. Had that dream to come to the Big Apple and made it happen right away. And I was traveling all over the country, doing different regional productions in theater, and then got a national tour and was traveling all over, going to Canada, all kinds of things. And during that time, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And while I was diagnosed, I ended up going on a medication that pretty much prevented me from becoming a mom whenever I wanted to. They actually said that if I were to get diagnosed, I would have to have an abortion, no questions asked. So at the time it was fine, but then as, the years went on, I've been with my husband now for almost 14 years. And well, that's as of today, but back then it was about maybe 5 years. And it was okay. We weren't ready at that point. Um, but then as time went on, about 2019, I was realizing like I'm kind of ready for this um, transition. And I knew it was going to take a long time for me to get off of medication. And so I really wanted something positive to focus on and give me energy instead of feeling like I was just in this period of waiting. And so I decided to start a podcast. And so that's exactly what I did. I started originally, it was called the Pumping Podcast, but now it's called Mamas in Training, MAMAS, Mamas in Training. And its intention is to give aspiring like myself and expecting moms, guidance and community from moms who have been there. And so I interview women about what they wish they had known before they become a mom, or before they became a mom. And for me, it's really given me an opportunity to use my creative abilities as an actor and a voiceover artist. But it's also helped me during this time and period of waiting before I move into motherhood to learn everything I possibly can. And it's truly been life-giving. It's been amazing.
Wow, that is truly amazing. You have a really interesting story. So I want to thank you for sharing that, and I could sense some vulnerability in there, and I really want to thank you for just kind of, sharing with us your path. And I wanted to hear a little bit more from you about your business. You talk from everything from fitness to mindset to breastfeeding. There's so
Yeah,
much that you
covering all
are
the topics.
learning, and and so what is your specialty when it comes to your business? What is that main goal, that connecting thread between everything?
Well, I think it's exactly the word you just said. I actually do feel like I'm the connecting thread. So, because I'm not necessarily an expert, in the field of fitness or in the field of breastfeeding or sleep or anything like that, um, I just have this massive curiosity and excitement to learn. I've always kind of been a little bit of a birth story junkie too. So, like learning from different moms about what their birth journey and pregnancy journey was like. What I'm doing is I'm just gathering all of this information, taking it all in, and then I'm creating community. And so I'm really like you and the Facebook community that you've created. I do the same thing with Mamas in Training. We also have a monthly meeting where we meet and connect over Zoom to really have that understanding that we're all in this together and you don't have to suffer alone no matter what it is. So if someone comes to me and they're struggling with breastfeeding, I'm not the expert, but I'll connect them to somebody who is. If someone's struggling with sex during pregnancy or sex postpartum, once again, I'm not the expert, but I can connect them to someone who is. And so that's sort of been my main goal in all of this is I have all of this knowledge that I've learned from over 100 interviews. And it's given me an opportunity to really support women no matter where they are in their motherhood journey, even if they're just like me and they're an aspiring future mama. It gives me the opportunity to support them exactly where they're at and connect them to the tools and the people that they need support from.
Wow, I really love this. It seems like it hasn't been done before, and I really appreciate how you're out there supporting pregnant and postpartum moms, or even moms that are aspiring to be moms at this point. It sounds like you are, by accident, some kind of liaison for this group of women that need support and guidance. And even though you don't know what to do, you know who to send them to. And I think that's amazing in this day and age of technology and Google and having the world at our fingertips. Moms end up Googling or Pinteresting something, but they're might not necessarily be getting the best information or the right information. So I love that you are a beacon of information and a source that individuals can trust when they're looking for the right information, and then you put them through with the experts. So that is so mind blowing. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank-
You seem to have this like deep and inner passion for this topic. And why do you take your free time, your extra time towards something like this?
That's a really good question. And, I think it's one that people are always caught off guard when I say that I have a pregnancy and birth podcast about motherhood. They're like, what? You're not yet a mom. Or they say, like, oh, you're expecting? No, I think it's kind of twofold. What I ended up learning, so the second part of it is that there really isn't much and there isn't a space for the aspiring future mama. There was actually even an app recently that had come out. Since then, they've changed things, but there was an app that was for motherhood and it was for connecting with people. And I went to go join because I thought, well, this is a great place to just keep learning more. But in the sign up process, there literally was no option for me because you had to either put in your due date if you were trying to conceive or how old your baby was. And there was no place for someone who just wanted to learn. And, like for me, for example, living in New York City, you don't necessarily want to sit on the subway and read what to expect when expecting when you're not expecting. So the podcast has really become a great place, not only for myself, but for other women who are listening to kind of listen in their own time and in their own privacy and just take in all this information. But, Daisy, for me, I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it was my own mother that inspired me or what, but I've just always knew that I wanted to be a mom. And it's been something that's been at the core and so deep down. I just feel it so intensely. And when I was told, now back when I was told that I, couldn't just get pregnant naturally, I think I was only like 27 at the time. And so I wasn't even personally ready for that stage, but it still kind of hit me just that I wouldn't have this flexibility to just, go about my own timing. And I really needed something to just lift me up, to just keep me positive, to just keep me focused. And I think if I didn't do something like this, I would have spent the last 8.5, 9 years just thinking about what I can't do yet, just thinking like, I wish I could be there. And I think it really would have messed with me a lot more than it did, but it made me really intentional and really present. And, like you've probably heard people say, like turning my mess into my message in a way.
That's amazing. A lot of times when people tell me I can't do something and it's not meant for me or whatever, I almost
Yeah.
want to do that thing
More.
more
Yes, exactly.
and prove them wrong. So I
Absolutely.
don't know if you've
Yep.
got a little bit of that in you. So I can
Mhm.
really relate to what you're feeling. And I think as you go along your journey, you'll see more pieces of this puzzle unfold and naturally kind of fall into place with ultimately where you're supposed to be. You've got this open mind and you're doing something 100%. So when it happens, you're going to be ready. Oh my gosh. It's
Right.
going to make
I always say I'm either going to be like the best patient or the worst patient, because I'll know so much of what I want and don't want.
right.
Um, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Awesome. So I wanted to go a little bit more into the three pillars of motherhood. I'd love for you to dive into them. Is this something that you have put together based upon your knowledge? Yeah, let's get into these
Yeah.
pillars.
Yeah. So it was around my 100th episode of Mamas in Training that I really did some reflecting. And after interviewing over 100 women, I realized that there were three common themes, which I now identify as the three pillars of motherhood that came up every single episode in some way or another. And they were advocacy, planning and preparing, and community. And I just saw this massive spotlight and I thought, man, this needs to really be the baseline of anyone's parenthood journey, but I refer in my community as a motherhood journey, because we need advocacy, planning and preparing, and community when we're an aspiring mom, all the way up to our entire life as a mother. If we're a seasoned mom, like if our kids are going to college, like at all times we need these. So I'll give you some examples of different ones and how they can benefit or support each other. So, for advocacy, for example, advocacy obviously can be something that seems um, like a no brainer, but I think oftentimes we don't really utilize advocacy in the way that we know we need to. And so, like, for example, for me, the way that I relate to advocacy is during my autoimmune disease, when I was trying to figure out what was going on, I ended up developing something on my skin that looked very similar. So I was diagnosed partially with psoriasis. And I ended up then being developing these spots that looked different from psoriasis and felt different from psoriasis. So I went to my doctor and I asked him if he could check these out and, what are these? And he said, oh, well, that's psoriasis. And I said, I really don't believe it is. If you could please do a biopsy so that I know exactly what it is. And he said, I'm positive they're psoriasis. I was like, okay, here I am advocating for myself. I'm like, that's great. I understand what you think it is, but I would like a biopsy. And he went all the way to say, I am 99% sure that it is psoriasis. And after I continued to advocate for myself and he did a biopsy, it comes out it was not psoriasis, it was vasculitis. And instead of just saying, like, I told you so, I went over to my rheumatologist who I was working with at the time. And he said, well, thank goodness that you got this biopsy, because the way that we would treat vasculitis is very different than the way that we would continue to treat psoriasis. And had we not treated the vasculitis, it could have in the future affected other organs that you have. So this just really shone a light for me on the importance of sticking up and speaking out for our desires and what we know to be true. We have been with our bodies for 20, 30, 40 years. And I know you talk a lot on the podcast about our bodies, how we're going to make them strong, how we're going to make them, agile, your pelvic floor, all of these things. And if we have an opportunity to just connect into what we know is right or wrong, and then be able to speak up for those things, it's going to make our motherhood journey so much better. So, like, say you're postpartum, the opportunity to speak up when you know, something maybe is not right with your pelvic floor. And you might hear them saying, oh, it'll get better in a few months, it'll get better. And it still isn't, or you just know deep down, get that second opinion, get that third opinion. I just think it's really important for us to take the time to speak up when we know something isn't right.
Beautiful. I love how you've advocated for yourself.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when patients advocate for themselves, what usually happens afterwards, the conversation between the other medical professionals, is they're typically laughing or mocking the patients
Mm,
for asking or pushing for these things. Like, oh, Dr. Google told them this,
mm.
or they don't know what they're thinking or feeling, that sort of stuff. You're comparing my medical degree to your instincts. I really just love how you stuck to your guns. Most people don't, because you're dealing with an individual that is considered a person of power. It is hard to keep pushing on and keep advocating. So,
Yeah.
I really
It's
do
one of those
appreciate that.
it's one of those things though that, like, we will learn in the future too, to continue advocating for our future children, or if children, if you already have them,
Sure.
as they grow. And so the ability for us to start this early is so essential. And like, one thing that just came to me too, in advocating for yourself, it could even look like say postpartum. It could even advocating for yourself could even look like, who are you welcoming and inviting and allowing into your space postpartum? What type of energy do you want around you when you're healing? And nowadays with COVID, like, do you require people to have vaccines around your children? Do you require people to wear masks? I mean, there's so many ways that we're constantly needing to advocate for ourselves. And so if anybody is in the beginning stage, whether they're expecting or they're an aspiring future mama, like, this is the time to start. And then if we've already had our baby, like, it's never too late, to start speaking up. And you're going to need that in the future anyway. It's just interesting though, because I think we're more apt to advocate for our children. Like, that comes easily to us,
Absolutely. Yep.
um, than ourselves.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah. And so the
And
second,
what you mean
Mhm.
by preparation.
Yeah. So planning and preparing, of course, when I speak from a point of, the aspiring mama, it might look a little bit different than someone who's a new mom or a seasoned mom. But with anything that we're doing, whether we're planning and preparing to have a baby, or we're planning and preparing to like start solids with our newborns, or we're planning and preparing for our kids to go to school, like it could be anything. What I really like to recommend is something called like drinking from the fire hose. So, like, sit there, take in all the information. If you have the time to read all the books, listen to the audio books, listen to the podcasts, have the conversations with people, do all of the things, take the classes on things that even you don't expect or think that you desire to do. So, for example, if you're pregnant, you're researching C-sections and natural vaginal birth. If you are preparing for breastfeeding and you want to breastfeed, it's also looking at formula and making sure that there's a formula that you're okay with before baby comes. And then if you're postpartum, it's looking into the help that you will need, and not thinking like, oh well, this happened or that happened. And so, for example, so you're going into your second having your second baby. The way that you did it the first time shouldn't necessarily dictate the way you do it the second time. So maybe you do want to hire extra help. Maybe you do want to ask some friends and family to come over and support you. But planning in a sense that's like gathering all of this information about everything and then being able to sift through what works for you and what doesn't, and then preparing by setting things up ahead of time. And so, if you are expecting, creating your postpartum plan, what is that going to look like? Maybe even setting up some dates ahead of time with your partner so that you know that you can get out of the house, making that restaurant reservation, setting up that babysitter. But I think oftentimes we can get very narrow minded and focused on one thing or the other. But I think in motherhood, we have to know that there are so many different ways that we can go about different things. And so I think just having an open mind and drinking from that fire hose and then figuring out really what pulls at your heartstrings and in your gut and what you think is best.
Awesome. I love that. That is definitely something that everyone listening can actually just take and start applying immediately. So the last pillar is community, and it
Mhm.
seems like an obvious pillar. But is there more that you can chat about the final pillar of community?
Yeah, community to me, I like to talk about community in the sense of third party community. And so we have all of our friends, we have our family, we might even have our therapist, we have like certain people in our back pocket, but there's a real importance for third party community, meaning maybe it's in person groups, maybe it's online Facebook groups like yours or like Mamas in Training, these different areas that we can reach out and be with people who don't know anything about us, who don't have any preconceived notions, who don't know any history. What I really like to talk about is the people who are going on to their second and third baby, maybe. The third party community is going to lift you up and support you and respond to this pregnancy and this birth much different than your family is or your friends are. I mean, of course, they're going to still be excited for you and support you, but this is a whole new ball game when you start adding more kids to the mix. And you still should be celebrated and supported the way that you were with your first. And so the opportunity to have people lift you up, to have people see you in a sense that's not just like, oh, she's done it once, so she gets it, I think is really, really important. So I highly recommend, finding these groups, whether it's your or my Facebook group, whether it's these online groups, whether it's in-person groups, whether it's like due date groups, because the other thing that community does is it kind of holds up a mirror to your own personal experience. So you could be thinking, for example, that you're doing pretty good, like say you're postpartum. You could be thinking like, oh, I feel pretty great. Then you could go to this postpartum group and you could hear somebody else's story or multiple people's stories and realize you might be suffering a little bit more than you should be. Maybe you're just hearing like this is normal in your day to day. But then when you see the level that other people who are kind of in your same timeline are at, you might be thinking, wow, I'm actually needing a little bit more support from my therapist or support from, my pelvic floor physio or whatever it is that you might not see if you're not with that third party community.
I love that. That's definitely not what I thought community pillar would be. So I guess I jumped
Yeah.
to some assumptions or conclusions. I'm
Oh, it's
really
all good.
glad that you took the time to explain your framework. It is really super amazing. How are you using this framework with women? How are you implementing this framework?
Yeah, like supporting and implementing. I think it's primarily just kind of been as it's the pillars of motherhood, it's kind of become the pillars of the business and the podcast and what I do. And so when I'm supporting people online, when I'm supporting people on Instagram, when I'm creating podcast episodes, I'm always coming at it from the sense of these three kind of pillars to create the foundation, and how can, reflecting back, how can we always check into these and use these in a sense. And then in addition, of course, as I mentioned, I created Mamas in Training, our Facebook group. And so that's creating the third party community for women to go to, whether they're an aspiring mom and they want a safe place to learn about motherhood, kind of like, privately on Facebook in their own time and not really share it with their friends and family. Or if someone's currently expecting and they want to be with people who are walking that stage with them. Or thirdly, if they're, a seasoned mama or new mama and they just want to know that there are other women out there who've gone through this and can give them some support based off of their own personal experience.
Awesome. I love that. I want to thank you for being vulnerable with us and sharing your world. And I know a lot of the moms want to be moms, postpartum, pregnant women that are all listening want to hear more of where they can find you.
Well, what I would love to recommend to anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more is to actually check out a very specific episode that's a little bit different. So I primarily interview women who've been there, but episode 106 is actually with a dad. And this is because I wanted to hear the partner's perspective. And this dad that I interviewed, his name is Ellie Weinstein. He actually suffered a panic attack postpartum with his first child. And so it's really an important episode for anyone to listen to, even if they're a seasoned mama, to understand if they have a partner, what their partner might be going through. Because oftentimes when we're pregnant or we're going through this stage of motherhood, it's very all about me. Because, if you birth the child, then it's, how you're feeling and what you're going through. And then it's postpartum, what you're feeling, how, what you're going through. But your partner could really be silently suffering. So I think it was one of the most eye-opening episodes for me. And I think that might be a great place to start. So I would recommend heading over to Mamas in Training, MAMAS, and checking out episode 106. It's called What About Dads? How Your Partner Could Silently Be Suffering. Um, and then, of course, to find the podcast in general, you can just find it on all podcast apps, Mamas in Training. You can go to our website, mamasintraining.com. And then you can connect with me personally over on Instagram. That's at Mamas in Training Pod, POD. Please send me a DM. Please reach out because I listen to all of them. And I'm really passionate too about creating episodes specifically for my listeners. So what I do is I take topics that people ask me about and I create episodes from them. So if there's something that you're looking to find more information on, you can definitely send me a message over on Instagram or through my website, and I'll do my best to find an expert to cover it and get an episode out there for you. And of course, the Facebook group
So
can
I'm going to
join that
make
as
sure
well.
that
Yeah.
everything is linked out for everyone who
Awesome.
wants to check you out and stalk you and become part of your community.
Anyone is welcome.
Awesome.
Just
I really,
stalking can begin.
right, exactly. I love this sense of inclusion. And so I have one last question for you. And you had said earlier that you started this podcast because you wanted to learn from the experts the things that no one ever told them about. Now, I want to learn from your perspectives. What is that one thing that moms who are ready to have a baby should they know going forward? What is that take home message you would give to the aspiring mom based upon what you've learned throughout your journey?
Yeah, I think it's definitely for the aspiring future mama. And also, it works if you're currently expecting, or if you're going to expect, you have a second or third baby. There are so many options, and you have so much more say and control than you think and you realize. Oftentimes I've heard that, you really go into this process, and just as you said, the medical world is amazing and definitely has its place, but it can leave us feeling a little bit like inadequate, and a little bit like we don't know enough, or we don't know best or better, which is probably, to a certain extent true. Of course, we haven't taken the classes, we haven't gotten their certifications. But as I mentioned in the beginning, you know your body. And so you are the best expert to your gut and to what you know is right and true. And in addition, you just have so many options. Like, you don't have to stay with your gynecologist that you've been with since you were 18 if you don't think that they're going to support you in the way that you want to be supported as a provider for birth and pregnancy. So look for another provider. I mean, you can switch providers up until the day that, the week before you give birth or whatever. This can happen. And so many people feel stuck. There are also so many options for birth itself and what you can request, what you can, how you can move through that timing. And in addition, what happens immediately after birth with you and with baby. And these are things that were just like unbelievable. I had no idea that you could ask for the golden hour. You could ask for skin to skin during your birth or laboring. You can ask to not have an IV put in. You can, there's so many things here that you can, if you don't drink from the fire hose, like I mentioned beforehand, and really in your planning process, take in all of this information, you will never know. And you'll just go into your appointment with your provider if you choose to be with a hospital, or even with someone like a midwife. You'll go into that just thinking that they know best and that what they say is gold. But there are other options. And then being strong enough to take that planning and preparing that you did with the support of the community that you have, and advocating for yourself and speaking up for what you want and your desires.
Wow. Okay, that blew my mind again. Thank you.
You're
You've answered
welcome.
all the questions so well, and you've left me wanting more. So,
Oh, good. I
I
love
want to
it.
thank you for taking the time out of your day
Of
to
course.
chat with us and help us advocate and prepare and bring a little community our way. I do appreciate that. I know
Absolutely.
everyone's going to really love this episode, and of course, your links are going to be in the show notes for anyone that wants to check them out. But I do want to thank you again for taking the time hanging out with us on the Strong Moms Fitness podcast. And of
You're
course, I'd
welcome.
always love to have you back if that opportunity comes up.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Wasn't that amazing? Jessica was like, a beacon of light. And also, before I say goodbye to you, I do want to let you know that if you are listening right now when this episode is released, I have my Rebuild After Baby program available and on sale for $50 off the original price. So if you are someone who is ready to start working out after baby, if you are concerned with things like core, pelvic floor, and avoiding injury, or even if you don't know that those are a thing for you, I want you to check out Rebuild After Baby because it is going to show you what your body needs at this moment and help you through that journey the right way, taking you through those right steps. If you are postpartum, you're a new mom, you probably don't know what you need to do next. And Rebuild After Baby is that next best step. So I want you to head over to rebuildafterbaby.com. I will also put that information in the notes in case you're interested. So thanks so much. And I hope you join me next time on the Strong Moms Fitness Podcast. Mm.